Hey guys and girls, how you going? Thank you very much for joining me for another chat about Nikon equipment and various other off-market products. So today we've got some exciting things to talk about. The headline of the day is a new lens that I've purchased. I've got a long telephoto up to 600 mils. We'll go into that in just a minute. But also the principle of this video is really reviewing the Nikon Z9 purchase recently. My very last two videos were really orientating around the Z9, why I got it and how good I think it may be. And really I am very pleased with it. So I'm going to give you some details and various accessories, and I'll give you photo samples as well to show you how I've gone with it, actually out in the field and using it in the real world. Now, I've done recently a photo shoot with a lovely pair of young ladies, and they were doing a cosplay arrangement, and they got dressed up very well, and we went out to a beautiful Japanese garden, and I'll show you some sample photos of how the Nikon Z9 performed on that day. Now, principally, I was using two Sigma lenses. I was using the 85 1.4 and the 50 1.4, depending on the situation. But it worked brilliantly well. So with the right lighting and a great camera and lens combination, you can really do some amazing things and get some terrific results. So I'll show you all about that very shortly, but I just wanted to let you know they actually did a real world photo shoot with it. The other thing I'm going to do is a lot of bird photography. So very close to where I live, only for a 10-minute drive away, is a lake. And around that lake is a lot of wildlife, birds and various creatures. And I often will walk the dog, and as I walk the dog around this large lake, I'll take the camera gear with me and take some photos while I'm doing it. And I'll show you many samples about how well the Nikon Z9 has worked for me there, getting action shots and taking advantage of things such as the 20 frames per second and the terrific focusing that it has. So the fact that it can keep up with those 20 frames a second and nail focus all the time is a real blessing and a bonus for me. So I'm very excited to be able to use that. It's a great privilege. So do I, in oversight, recommend the Z9 to anyone to purchase? Well, absolutely I do. The Z9, which I have of course right here in front of me. Now you may notice that I'm shooting on I'm shooting at a Nikon Z6 right now, and I'm using the zoom lens, the 24-70 f4 on that frame now with all my monitor and sound equipment. Now I'm filming with that because it's at f4 right now, and that's handy when I'm actually demonstrating products. So if I'm just having a headshot talk to you, I don't need to have a shallow depth of field when I'm demonstrating products. That's great for one-on-one, but when I'm trying to show you things, it's actually better that I get a longer depth of focus, and you can actually see what I'm talking about in focus. So I'm using f4 right now, and I think it's turning out quite well. So in oversight of this Z9 now, I'm loving it, and I'm just letting you know that I'm very pleased with it. Everything about that they hype up about the camera is actually true. It does perform beautifully. The autofocus is, well, in my opinion, second to none. Certainly, I've never had better, and I'm pretty sure I've no opportunity right now to compare it with, say, a Sony A9 or a Canon, 3D or whatever the latest version is that they have. And I'm sure they're magnificent as well, but this is more than satisfactory for what I need, and I'm very pleased as a Nikon shooter to have a flagship camera that actually functions so well. So I'm very pleased with both the image quality, I'm very pleased with the autofocus, and I'm very pleased with the functionality and ergonomics of the camera. So that's the positive news. Is there a negative news? Well, it's not really a negative, it's only an inconvenience. And the inconvenience is the sheer weight of the camera itself. It is very heavy, and of course that gets quite burdensome. Now you throw into that equation a nice big long zoom lens that weighs 2 kilos as well, and you've got 3.5 to 4 kilos you're carrying around with you all day, and that can get very exhausting. So in the negative format, heavy equipment means you get tired very quickly. So what can you do to compensate for that, for example? Well, there are options. One is, and I highly recommend this, and I'll just bring it over my shoulder here, I have a harness. And this harness goes over the back of my head, and this part sits on the front, and then with a little attachment you can slot the camera in and carry all the weight of the lens and camera over the torso of your body. So this is called a cotton carrier system. I highly recommend something very similar to that. This brand is exceptionally good. It's of very high quality, so I will recommend the cotton carrier system. Sorry, I know I always tend to put things to my chest and cover the microphone, so I hope the sound wasn't too disturbed. But a cotton carrier system is an excellent system. Take all the weight and put it over your torso so your arms aren't going to jelly in no time. And of course course, that opportunity you have then to slot it in and rest your arms, it gives you that, re-energizing of strength and blood flow to hold up the camera should you wish to do that manually. So that's a good thing to do. The other option you can do, carry the weight and support it when you're using a heavy lens, whether that be a prime for doing portraits, or if you're using zoom for doing bird photography, as I do a lot of, you can use a monopod. Now this monopod here is a wonderful product. It's a Leaf Photo monopod, and it's one of the heaviest ones that they build. And I've got the heaviest one because I'm going to be using it for heavy equipment. So it was no point buying something that was light and flimsy. You needed something with the strength to hold up and endure. Last thing you want is to extend all the legs and then they sort of creep in slowly because of the sheer weight of the gear. So you wanted something that you can actually make nice and sturdy and strong and won't flex and bend around. And as you can see by the thickness of these layers here, the legs are actually quite solid and robust. It's a graphite composite, so we know that it's going to be very, very strong, and it's also extremely lightweight. So I bought this, it was a happy purchase. It was several $100s, but it was probably the best money I've ever spent as far as having a good sturdy photos and taking all the weight and stress off your arms. So for taking the actual photo at that moment, a nice quality graphite composite monopod is an excellent idea. You can use a tripod as well, of course, but a tripod's just more cumbersome and more time consuming to set up. You've just got 3 legs to deal with instead of 1. And this way it's just a little bit more flexible and easy to set up on the go. So I highly recommend a monopod. I think that's a great system to go with. Now with the monopod, you may have noticed I have a little Arco Swiss mount on it. And on the base of my lenses, the lenses that do of course have these collars, and if I need it on the camera, I have a Arco Swiss mount as well. And that means that I can put the monopod on the lens, and that's where it centralizes the balance. So when you've got the two together, the weight is distributed evenly like a seesaw on the actual collar mount, and it's very well balanced and comfortable to use. If you put it only on the camera, then what happens is you tend to get a balance where it's very forward heavy, and it makes it more awkward to use and take advantage of and get a steady shot. So I found utilizing the collar to put the Arco Swiss mount on is a great way of doing it. Now you can just use the screw-in thread and screw that in, but that's just quite fiddly and awkward. It's a lot easier just to turn a little knob at your fingertips here and lock it in place, and I find that far more versatile and convenient. So yes, I've been using this new lens, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that too while I've got it here, and I was just illustrating bird photography and heavy lenses. I was in the market to purchase very recently the brand new Nikon lens that has just come out. Now what is that? Well, that's their big great value consumer zoom. It's 180mm to 600 f5.6 to 6.3 zoom. And it's a great thing for wildlife and sports photography. So if you're, say, as I am, with this sort of field of photography, amateurish, and I like to just have fun with it, and I'm not selling my images to a newspaper or a magazine like National Geographic or making a living out of it, you're just enjoying the experience, it's nice to have something quite affordable. Now that new Nikon lens, that Z-mount lens, is magnificent, and I highly recommend it. In fact, I have every intention of buying it, but unfortunately, as I've just spent all this money on the Z9 and associated accessories with it, I just didn't have the cash flow to go and buy that new lens that I would have liked. So the option that I've chosen is a second-hand lens that was a cheaper alternative to tie me over temporarily until I can save up funds, probably the end of this year. So what have I purchased? Well, what I have here is the Sigma. Now the Sigma is a very similar theme to that lens. It's a long lens, it's a zoom. This one here is 150 to 600mm. So it's a little bit wider at the wide end, but it's the same length at the long end. It's f5 to f6.3. Very, very similar numbers there. So there's some slight variations, but it doesn't really matter. It's insignificant, those differences. What is a major difference in the lens is, well, it's the price. This one here cost me $1,000 secondhand online on eBay, whereas the new Nikon one would be $3,000 Australian. Now that's $3,000 Australian is very affordable. That's a great value for money item. I just didn't have all that cash right now, thanks to all my other spending. So I had to be sensible, and I wanted something straight away I could use at 600mm, but I just couldn't outlay all that cash. So what I've done is I've compromised to buy this, and I've had a lot of fun with it, and it's doing a very good job. The only downside I don't like about these sort of type lenses, it has a lock on it, which is great, but of course what it does is it extends out at the barrel there, as you can see, quite long. Now that's great to get your 600 mils, but the problem is it does make it quite, front heavy, and that's sort of a little bit awkward, isn't it? So to have the internal zooming that the Nikon lens has is a great feature. Also helps a lot with weather resistance. You're just a lot more confident if it's internally zooming and not extending out a barrel. It's less likely to be affected by rain and dust and wind and other conditions. But look, I've used this lens extensively recently and I found it very excellent, and I thought it was a great value for money option until I could afford to buy something better. Now, would I ever buy something like a 400 or 600 mil TC? Well, no, I wouldn't buy them. As excellent as they are at $25,000 Australian, I could never justify it. As I said, I'm not a working professional wildlife sports action photographer. If I was, it would be worth purchasing. But for the minor differences in image quality, and look, when I say minor, it's probably a good 25 to 30% better quality. But for $20,000 more, I just can't justify it. So I'm very happy with the purchase I got right now, this Sigma 150 to 600. That's doing me very well for the moment, but look forward to me getting that Nikon lens probably at the end of the year, and I'll do a comparative review so we can see images of both lenses and see which ones perform, whether it's remarkably different or not. But at the moment, as I say, I highly recommend the Sigma for a budget conscious person who just doesn't have the money to throw around right now. It does work with the FTZ adapter. It works extremely well on the Nikon Z9, and I've been very happy with it. It's probably a little bit slower in autofocus, but it's fast enough to get the shots I need, and so I can still recommend it with good conscience. So on this subject of wildlife photography, for example, I will encourage people to use a speedlight or a flash. The difference something like this will make in your photography is unbelievable with wildlife. Now you might think to yourself, okay, why would you possibly use a speedlight when you're using 600 mils? Isn't everything too far away? Well, there are occasions where you're zooming right out to something that is 10, 20, 30 meters away, and yes, then it is particularly useless. But a lot of the small birds that I take photo of aren't actually that far away. It appears that they're far away because they're so small, but no, they actually might only be between 3 to 5 meters away, and using the flash will make a massive difference in filling those shadows, particularly if the subject is backlit. So if it's backlit, it gives a beautiful image, a nice halo of light around the far side of the creature. But the near side, of course, is in shadow and is very dark, and will often end up quite dark and grainy. So rather than have to tolerate all that graininess, pop a little bit of flash on that image and it'll fill out those shadows, and the image will be razor sharp and look beautiful. I'll show you some photos, of course, samples where I've used the flash on birds, for example, in backlit situations, and just how much difference it makes it's amazing. So thank you for bearing with me of that. Getting back, however, to the actual Z9 itself, what are some of the features that I've found particularly useful? Well, look, I am loving the fact that the FTZ adapter works so well with it because I have so many Sigma lenses. I do have Nikon lenses as well, so when I want a Nikon Z mount lens, I have those and I can use them, but budget friendliness of second-hand Sigma lenses is great, and I love to use them. You can use Tamron ones as well, and even the F-mount Nikon lenses work extremely well. A little bit of an interesting thing on that is I've noticed that when I use the Sigma lenses with the FTZ adapter, that's the F-mount Sigma lenses, I notice that it's actually quite quiet and you barely notice any grindy noises. But when I use the F-mount Nikon lenses, well, I notice there's actually quite a lot of noise, and you hear that clicky, clicky, grindy, clicky, grind all the time. So it's just interesting, isn't it, that the actual F-mount Nikon lenses are louder than the aftermarket Sigma F lenses. I thought that was quite ironic. So I'm actually enjoying it for video, that it's actually quite quiet and peaceful to hear. That was just a little side point. Things I am liking about this is with the FTZ adapter, that's the Mark II version, I can of course fit my full hand around the camera and use the grip to its full potential. So in no way am I limited and finding this inconvenient. The old FTZ adapter with the lump was very annoying and it was cramping your fingers up. You could get away with using it, but it wasn't as much fun. This is far more comfortable and is barely noticeable at all. It doesn't really affect with the profile and in any way. I found that this lens cap, this little cup that I purchased as well recently, and I did a talk on that in my last video, this has been a real godsend. To be able to place that up to your eye and completely shut out all the stray light is absolutely magnificent. That useless little rubber ring that they gave you with the Z9 was actually useless, and I just threw that away in the bin. That was a waste of money. But spending, say, $30 or $40 on a good soft silicone rubber eye piece like this is invaluable. And I love the fact that it rotates around at will very quickly for your comfort. So that's actually a great option. Another thing I've got recently too, and I did do a little bit of a discussion on this, was a video cage. Now this video cage here slips very quickly onto the Nikon Z. So what I'll do is I'll actually place it on and illustrate just how it fits together and how I use it and why. So just give me a second to put this together. And so as you can see here, I now have a complete unit. Now I've got an FTZ adapter on, not a lens, but this is for illustration purposes and it makes it much easier to see. You can pretend if you like that's a little 28 f2.8 lens, all right? So here we have it, we're going to do some video. And notice the two handles on either side of the cage. Now that's really critical because what I've found is that if you don't have two handles and you're just trying to hold the camera offset, you can be sort of out of balance with your motion and movement. So by having the two handles equally dispersed either side of the camera in the cage is a great balance and enables you now to fluidly move around and get nice smooth video without a gimbal, and it still looks very good. So having the image stabilization on and the electronic stabilization on as well if you wished it, you'll get quite smooth and fluid images. So I'm loving that and that's great. And of course this camera here, unlike the Z6, when you want to take 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second, the Z9 doesn't crop. So therefore you've retained your focal image in your framing, which is very important. So I love that feature as well. But these two handles are made by Small Rig. One is specifically a left-handed side one. This one here is a universal one. You could buy two universals and swap them around, but I happened to buy this one first, and then I thought, you know what, I need one for the other side. They don't actually make specifically a left one. What they do is they make a universal one. So I bought a left and a universal, and I've now got a nice comfy grip that I can hold both hands. They both mount the same fashion, which is this simple little screw-on fashion here. Little rig. And you see they come off in seconds if you want them off. You want them back on, it's just as quick. You just give that a little twist and they're locked back on in position again and you're right to go. And of course they have lots of accessory options. So you've got all these little mounting holes. You've got 3/8 and 1/4 in thread, and you've got obviously little hot shoe mounts as well on them, so you can put all sorts of manner of accessories on, and of course you've got that all over the cage as well anyway. So you've just got so many mounting options. That's terrific for things like microphones or monitors or anything else you'd like to put on them. But I just wanted to show you that rig. I think it's a beautiful little rig. The cage was about $170. The handles were about the same actually. I think they're about $170 each. So for about $400 or $500 you can get yourself together that full kit, and you've got a great video setup that actually, you know what is most impressive about this? It folds up so small in the camera bag. See, I used to have the Ronin, and that Ronin, what was it, the RC3, the latest version of that, was a brilliant unit for giving smooth and gloriously fluid video. The downside of it was packing it anywhere. You had to have a whole camera bag for it, and it was quite weighty, and it took time to put together, and then you had to balance it. And by the time you did all that, the moment was gone. You sort of gave up and you didn't care. The beauty of this thing is providing you've already got the camera cage on your camera anyway, because you're anticipating video, to put those two handles on, as you saw before with the screws, takes seconds and you're up and running in no time. So that was actually a real blessing to be able to get up and go so quickly. So I think this is actually a terrific idea. It's very lightweight, takes no room in the camera bag. You can fold it all together, and therefore it's not a burden to bring along with you should you want to do some video on the fly. But the two handles is actually really important. And as I say, for Small Rig, which I bought a lot of equipment from, I'm very happy and I'm very pleased I got it, and I highly recommend that rig. So I'm just going to place this down so I don't drop it and flip it over. Oh yes, I suppose I should also mention the other new camera release. Now we're getting that little, well, I should call it little, it's a retro style F camera. So it's pretty much like similar to I suppose a Z6 II, but it's the retro style, like the ZFC was. And I think it's a beautiful design. I'm all for having something retro. I've had the ZFC myself in the past, and I was charmed by its looks. I wasn't so impressed by its overall performance, I'll be honest with you, but it certainly looked beautiful. I think this full frame version will probably be a lot more practical and a lot more interesting. But will I buy it? I probably won't buy it because, you know, I'm really more looking forward to a Z6 Mark III. I think that's the sort of video camera I would like as a backup version that I believe will pretty much do anything. Be sort of like a mini version of the Z9, a bit smaller than the Z8, but a lot more affordable and generally consumer friendly. So I'm hoping that comes out by the end of the year, and I think that's something else I would like to acquire. So I've got a few purchases coming up. I got the big Nikon lens that I'm looking forward to getting, the 180 to 600, and then I've also got the Z6 III, which I would like to get. I'm no use buying the Z7 III for me because I've got the Z9. That's pretty much what that is. So it wouldn't be significantly different. May have a few more megapixels or other features, but certainly never going to be comparable to the Z9. So I may as well wait for the Z6 III and have that more budget-friendly version, but with a lot more high-end features. I think that's going to be the way to go. So the other thing I'd like to talk about is that you may notice that I don't pump out a lot of videos. So I'm not one of these guys who are putting out every second day, they're putting out a video on dribble, just trying to desperately to find something to talk about. So that they're filling airtime and getting their YouTube ratings up. You'll notice with myself, the only time I ever speak is when I've actually got something of value to say, contribute, or there's some actual new release that's worth talking about and confirmed. So I just wanted to let you know that even though I don't put a lot of content out, as many may, what I do try to put out is content that's relevant and I believe useful and interesting to you. So I apologise if not much is coming out very frequently, but I'm hoping that the quality of the content and the usefulness of the content is actually most relevant. I will make an interesting observation. I got quite a long post on one of my YouTube videos. I think it was the one on the accessories of the Z9. I deleted the post because the guy waffled on for about 200 words plus about how much he hated the way I do videos. He didn't like the fact that I don't start off immediately talking about the subject at hand, that I might have some opinions and I want to talk about something other than the primary subject. And he was sort of like quite put out. And I just dare remind anybody like him or anybody else that may be thinking such things that, of course, without being rude, this is my channel. I get to do it my way, the way I like and how I feel. If you don't like it, look, feel free not to watch. Because look, this is not monetized for me. I make no money out of this at all. I do it simply because of the love of sharing information and talking about camera gear. So if you're not overly wrapped in my style or the content, please feel free not to watch. There's no need to post a 200-word essay about how much you hate my guts. That's just really inappropriate. So of course, if you do leave a message like that, do expect that I will delete it because I just don't need the aggravation. But apart from that, look, most comments are very positive and I thank you very much for sharing them. In fact, I love positive criticism and I'm always happy to take on board any suggestions. So if you've got a positive and constructive suggestion, please let me know and I'm happy to take it on board and apply it, which I've done in the past. So thank you very much for your time. I'm going to round it up about there. I will be presenting another video in a couple of weeks, and that's after a big Japanese festival I'm doing very shortly. Locally here in Brisbane, there's a Japanese festival I've attended, and I've attended as actually their chief photographer. But this time I've not volunteered to do this photography. I've decided instead that what I would do is be just an independent assistant, and I would go around, take photos and videos of this event and just give them all the footage and photos and videos, and they can do as they please with it. If they wish to use it, great. If they don't, that's fine with me. It doesn't matter. I'm not being paid for the event at this time, so it doesn't matter to me. But I just wanted to share the joy of my Japanese culture, which I love. You can see that from all the paraphernalia around me. So I'll be there, I'll be filming, and I'll be doing photos. And what I'll be doing is making a video demonstrating the Z9, various different lenses, the video accessories that I've been showing you, and photo as well, to just give you an idea what it's like on the fly at a festival when you're very spontaneous and you're swapping from photos to videos, videos to photos, mostly with the one camera. So that'll be something interesting to look at for in a few weeks' time. Please look forward to viewing that. In the meantime, all my love to you and have a very nice evening. Thank you.